Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Hope everybody's having a relatively good start to the week. There's three things I wanted to talk about, and they kind of all lead into the last point that I want to talk about. But the first thing that I wanted to cover was news coverage on SpaceX. It's been interesting, right? Like, I've been a Tesla shareholder since 2016, 2017. It was basically a couple months before the stock skyrocketed. And I've talked about it before. That's ultimately how I was able to come up with the money to leave New York City and buy a house. But the reason why I made that investment is because there was a lot of information that was available. And as I started to not only read more about Tesla at the time, I also started to follow kind of the finance YouTuber community, which was also at that point just starting to get in Tesla. So I had a lot of I had my own opinions, and then I was also getting varying opinions from folks out there. And I did like the way that everybody kind of presented things. Though I will say that people that didn't like Tesla um, were manipulating statistics or manipulating facts based on skewed statistics. But at any rate, it was clear that that company was going to take off. And now every single time I would turn on the news, say Bloomberg or um, Fox Business or any other ones, it was constantly talking about the competition is coming, the competition is coming, the competition is coming. Oh, they're just an auto manufacturer. They're only an auto manufacturer and should only be viewed as an auto manufacturer. Um, and there was just a lot of consistent FUD that was being put out. Um, well, as I started to follow the people that were talking about Tesla on TV, it also became known that a lot of these people, upwards of over 90% of them, were holding short positions in Tesla. So they were incentivized to actually go up and say negative things about Tesla in order to drive the stock price down, so that they could then recoup on their short positions. I will say over the long run, all of those people lost money. Betting against Tesla in this case did not work out well for those individuals. Now, fast forward to SpaceX. I've been following SpaceX. I've got I've got that. I've got the worm. That's a worm logo. Space Force. I need to get Blue Origin over here, but I've been following space for a very long time. From a kid, I was watching shuttle launches. I also was in school, and school got let out early when I think it was Challenger exploded, and all of us kids were watching it live on TV. Not the best thing, and that was also the last shuttle launch that was watched live in school. But nonetheless, I've had a fascination with space and kind of the final frontier my entire life. And so I find this stuff interesting, and I've always followed it relatively closely. So, from the time that SpaceX came around, I was, like most people, very skeptical about the business, seeing that a private company was entering a space dominated by defense contractors. And it didn't seem like there was a real opportunity for an outsider to come into this space. And I would say that's probably the case for any company that tried it before Elon Musk took over SpaceX and ultimately got it to where it was before IPO. And so I've been following it. When they started testing, their little hopper, I found it interesting and seemed like, oh, they're actually kind of like doing this. Um, and they also started launching. And it became clear when they started launching, at least the first two, that um, they were going to change the game. And it became clear that the real barrier to entry into this space was both from a policy perspective, whether it was state, local, or federal policy, or it was the defense contractors themselves or the space manufacturers um, that were creating the actual barriers that were making it very difficult for new entrants to come in and upset the apple cart, so to speak. And so watching their launches was just fascinating. And then, we get to the point of now they're going to be testing the first, landed or recovered booster in the ocean. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And so I watched that live, and I watched it fail a lot, a lot, a lot. And then I watched it succeed. And it became apparent that once they got the first one figured out, and then they were able to do it again, and then again, and then again, maybe have a failure, and then do it again, and then do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. It became obvious that SpaceX was going to be light years ahead of the rest of the competition, and that their prices were going to drive down the overall market because now there was a lower cost launch provider who wasn't basically throwing away the rocket every single time that there was a launch, which ballooned the cost. They were able to recoup the booster stage and dramatically drive down the overall cost. And so I say all that to talk about where SpaceX is today. And so yesterday the stock drops, or a couple of days in a row the stock drops significantly, and then all of the people came out and were talking about, oh, SpaceX this, SpaceX that, oh, they're not worth it, they're not, blah 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 blah. So it was all of this stuff that was kind of just out there, and then they have the test flight that was going to happen last week, and there was an issue with two of the rocket motors, and they had to abort. And so news comes out about the abort, and it's like just putting out negative FUD about tests or about SpaceX and their ability to deliver. And I'm like, they're the largest launch provider in the world. They're testing a new rocket. To equate the testing of the new rocket to their overall business is like ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that they have their largest satellite internet provider growing by millions of subscribers every month. And so I just look at it and go, there's too much information that's available from the past to be able to equate anything that's happening currently with the testing phase of their new rocket and booster to equate anything. And so, again, the stock was up big today. The people that were talking about the stock being down over the last couple of days have kind of disappeared and are off talking about something else when SpaceX stock drops again, which it inevitably will, because the stock market goes up, the stock market goes down. That's just the way things work. There's buying opportunities. I did buy on the downside, an average down, because I was one of the people that got it at 135 and was able to get it in the 120s, which is fantastic. It's a great buying opportunity, at least in my personal opinion. But again, like, they've been around too long and there's too much information available of how this company runs to think any short-term issue provides any longer-term view into the organization. That leads me into Democrats versus the DSA. And I find this one very interesting because it was obvious to anybody with a set of eyes that the Democrat Party was becoming more radical within major cities. And living in New York City, it was obvious. Then I would travel to like Northern Virginia, and I'd be in the suburbs hanging out with my family and seeing my friends, and then going out locally and seeing what people were talking about there and how they were kind of viewing things. And these two Democrats do not mix. most of the Democrats that I know within Northern Virginia do not like AOC. They're not big fans of Bernie Sanders. And they definitely don't like the current crop of DSA candidates that are coming out and essentially saying that capitalism is akin to white supremacy. They just don't agree with it. And so the rise of DSA within New York, Colorado, and essentially Boston and Massachusetts, like the rise of these folks is turning off Democrat voters. And so it's just interesting, which is, by the way, the exact opposite of what happened with MAGA and how MAGA kind of took over the Republican Party. MAGA, the folks within MAGA weren't preaching that we need to end democracy and we need to install socialism and ultimately communism. We need to take over the means of production. We need to end police. We need to end ICE. We need to open border. Like all of this, like nobody in MAGA was for that. People in MAGA were concerned about U.S. issues. Now, there is a debate to be had of whether or not some of the foreign policy aligns with some of the kind of core issues within MAGA. Completely different conversation. But the fact of the matter is that Republicans and MAGA were both focused on U.S. and the current systems in place. The DSA wants to essentially end how things are currently done. Regular Democrats do not want that. They have no interest in that. They believe in the systems. They believe in America. They might not like the direction that Republicans are taking it, and they have different ideas, some of which I think are ridiculous, but they're not arguing for the end of democracy itself within the US, getting rid of the Senate. I mean, like, all of this stuff is just crazy. And the more that these DSA candidates are like on video talking about this stuff, the more Democrats recoil and want nothing to do with it. Originally, when you had like, Mom Donnie come out, Democrats could plausibly say like, oh, he's not really that socialist. He's not really, he's not really communist, and he's not going to really want to do all this stuff. Well, that opened the floodgates to all of these other candidates. And now Democrats are sitting back and going, oh, crap. Like, I didn't think it was as big of a deal as it is. Now it's actually like, this is who we're presenting. I mean, we just had the primary in May in the Democratic debate, primary contender. Like, Democrats are hurting right now. And they're hurting because a lot of Democrats, not a lot, but some Democrats identified with the MAGA side, identified with the Republican side much earlier. I'd say like I saw it way earlier than those individuals. By the way, I was a registered Democrat in Virginia. No longer, obviously. I'm a registered Republican in North Carolina. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm always going to vote Republican. I'm going to look at what these people are doing within the region. I will say we have a Democrat mayor for the town that I live in. He's doing a pretty good job. He's focused on bringing in businesses. He's basically a Republican. I would say he's closer aligned to the Republican Party than he is a Democrat Party. But in this area, you probably couldn't win if you ran as a Republican. So here we are. I can't complain about what he's doing. Is there somebody else that is running against him that has better ideas? I haven't seen any. And I would vote for this particular Democrat if you were running again, and there's no Republican challenger, and ultimately Republican challenger that's coming up with better ideas than what he is currently instilling right now. He's not woke. He's not focused on trans issues. He's not focused on all of this city stuff. He's focused on the issues the kitchen table issues that people care about, and he's out in the community, always in front of new businesses, and his social media is on fire. At any rate, he's not DSA. If he were a DSA candidate, he'd be run out of town so fast. You probably see the screech marks from his shoes. I mean, like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I think the more interesting thing is that Democrats allowed it to get to this point, and this goes along with a lot of other key issues as well. It's not happening. Well, it is happening, but it's not that big of a deal, or it's not happening. It's not happening enough to it's not happening at all. To it's happening. Okay, it's happening a little bit, but it's not really that big of a deal. It's not that widespread. This isn't as big of an issue as we need to make it. And okay, yeah, it's happening, and I totally agree with it. And usually that's the way that it goes for many things. And you can go from Democrats originally being in a position to say that they were against open borders, and every Democrat is on video saying that open border policy is not good. It drives down wages, and all of the things that Republicans say now, Democrats used to say. Now Democrats don't say that stuff anymore, and the Democrats that are the constituents that are voting for these people are out with the same talking points as well. Again, I didn't change. The Democrat Party changed and went way far left, much faster and much further than I was willing to accept. And this was years ago. But again, the information is out there on socialism. The information is out there on communism. This stuff doesn't work. And to say that places like Cuba or Venezuela or enter any communist country, I mean, the former USSR, I mean, like, you can't name a communist country that has freedoms, number one, and number two, ends up working out well for the people that are under that system. Usually it leads to a lot of poverty, a lot of famine, and a lot of death. That's what history tells us. If anybody picks a history book, you'll be hard-pressed to find any positive takes on socialism or communism. Yet here we are. DSA candidates are running as devout socialists, but they're also past writings and support is for communism. And so it's getting harder and harder as more information comes out about the people that are running under DSA. It's getting harder for Democrats to stomach it, which is why you're now seeing a lot of Democrats coming out and going, guys, we need to put the kibosh on this. They did this to Bernie Sanders back in 2016. But 2015, 2016, Bernie Sanders, not nearly as radical as 2026 Bernie Sanders. 2016 Bernie Sanders didn't want to burn down the whole system. And again, like, even then, I could see that the people that were following him probably wanted to burn down the system. I tried to go to the rally in New York City. I stood in line with my girlfriend and my mom for probably 4 hours, couldn't get in. There was too many people there. There was all his NYU students and Pace and Hunter students. And I mean, like, it was an S show. And it was clear that he had a lot of grassroots support. Now, a lot of the grassroots support that is out now running wasn't even old enough to vote then, which is crazy to think about. And now these people are coming out, or these people were like in high school or just in college. And now they've just fully been indoctrinated at this point, have drunk the Kool-Aid of socialism and communism and think that it's the end all be all, history be damned. So Democrats have a problem. James Carville and, all of these, high profile Democrats can come out now, but it's going to be very hard to put that back in the box. And ultimately, what I think is going to happen is that more Democrats are going to be voting for Republicans or just not voting at all which then they're removing their vote, which then gives a lot more opportunity for Republicans to win. Either way, it's a win-win. The more that these DSA candidates come out and are on TV saying that landlords shouldn't be making double-digit returns when they're making 12%, that doesn't even factor in any of the overhead. The more that they're out saying that stuff, the more that Democrats are going to recoil and either hold their nose and vote for Republican or not vote at all. My guess is that many of them, a majority of them, are just not going to vote. And the other ones that have some decency and some care will end up voting for Republican because they just do not want to see these DSA candidates have even an opportunity to win or to take their vote, and know that not voting is basically, in some cases, in some areas, as good as a vote for the DSA candidate. So again, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. But that leads me into the last place, which is information. There used to be a point at which the information flow was through a finite number of sources. You could look at it from this perspective of like, oh, there were only like 3 nightly news shows for decades. There was only 2 late night comedy shows. There's only a handful of radio stations. And I would say this was the case up until the advent of the internet. I mean, I used to listen to Casey Kasem's top 40 countdown for new bands. I was like, Def Leppard is on there, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Def Leppard's new release, and it's like charting at like number 9. And I used to record that because like there weren't CDs, and recording directly off the radio was just more of a common thing to do. But at any rate, the area where you get information was very, very limited. Either you're getting your news from the Washington Post, or in my house it was the Christian Science Monitor, and the Washington Post, or you're getting USA Today, a handful of magazine or a handful of those, or you were getting history from Britannica. You're buying the Britannica Encyclopedia collection, or you're going to your local library, or if you were in school, you're going to the library and then getting that, using it as your reference to build reports and do all that stuff. Like it was very finite. And so like your ability to access information wasn't as readily available, generally speaking, as it is today. And so I talk about the history of SpaceX and the company, where the stock is, and how people are talking about it now, devoid of any of the history. I talk about DSA, or Democrats versus the DSA, and how the DSA has winning message. History be damned. This information is out there for anybody to see and to take in. And so these narratives get harder and harder to maintain because of that access to information. If you want to see the historical kind of moves on SpaceX, you can actually just go into your AI search engine, or the AI tool that you're using. I use Grok a lot to actually give you a breakdown. And then you can question it, and you can get the feedback, and you can continue to dive more into something. And you can do that even at Google. Google's got its own AI. Microsoft has its own AI. Like all this stuff is baked in now. So the access to information is much easier. Instead of having to go search for it like you would 2 or 3 years ago, now you can actually just ask a question and it gives you a detailed response. And then you can dive further into that, which is great. But the fact that DSA is out there talking about how socialism wasn't done enough, or there are countries where it worked. Like history says otherwise, and anybody who has access to information can see right through this BS up front. The same thing for SpaceX, and the same thing for just bad policy. Like it's hard to argue that opening borders is good for America. Now Democrats need to figure out how they reel that back in and then turn it into a message that actually goes after working class Americans who are directly impacted by mass illegal immigration, not legal immigration. It's just you can't keep these narratives up and running for very long. You just kind of have to move on quickly to the next one and the next one and the next one. There's a lot of online news places. I always call it breaking points a lot. I would say they're case in point of this. Any argument that Brian Grimm or Crystal Ball are putting out are bunk. And if you have access to the internet, you can easily call balls and strikes. Sometimes they get stuff right. Most of the time, they're getting it wrong, and they're injecting their own opinion and feelings devoid of any fact to support what they're saying. It's difficult for people to argue that my biggest threat statistically is another black man killing me. That's just a statistical. It's just a statistical fact. Me getting killed by some random white person, probably not going to happen. Probably not going to happen. Just based on statistics alone. The same thing that says like a school shooting, like you getting caught in a school shooting. It's not something that anybody should be worried about, but the news would make you think otherwise. It's just the statistical probability of it happening is so low, it's ridiculous, no matter how much people want it to be true. These facts and numbers are out there. It's also, more people are killed by handguns than by rifles. And I won't say assault rifle because it's not a real term. And again, the internet exists. A handgun and an AR-15 function exactly the same. There is no difference in how they function. And if the term assault rifle, if you want to apply to something, apply to fully automatic weapons, if anything, which you can't get, by the way. They're illegal to own in the US, unless, of course, you have a license and you're a firearms manufacturer or you have your own gun range and you get licensed to actually have those on the premise. And they're actually a lot of fun to go shoot, but they're not very accurate. It's just really the exhilaration of pulling the trigger and having like so many bullets fly out. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. It's an adrenaline rush for sure. But a handgun works the same as an AR-15. You pull the trigger and you hold it down and only one bullet comes out. You have to pull the trigger in order to get bullets to come out of it. The same way with a rifle. And you might have a bolt action where you're using a bolt, you're doing the manual process that a semi-automatic handgun or rifle does, like an AR-15, but they all function the same. You pull the trigger, one bullet goes out, then it has to reset, you lift off the trigger, and then you can fire again. Again, this information is out there. It's just, I don't know how much longer I have an idea. It's more difficult now to just go on and lie about things because fact checking is out there, whether you're getting community noted in X or you have people just dropping in links to where the actual information is. I'm looking forward to the day where it's going to be much, much, much harder to lie on the internet just because people just don't put up with it. Right now, a lot of people put up with it and they believe it until they're beat over the head with facts constantly. And then they just move on to something else. But I can tell you, I'm one of those people that relies on the facts, relies on looking up if I'm going to reference something that has to do with any kind of historical precedent or numbers. I'm going to have those facts up and I will always pull them up and reference them as I have in the past. But what I won't do is go out and intentionally lie for the sake of clicks and whatever. But on that note, keep believing that the best is still ahead for America. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.